have an agenda before us. Can I get a motion to adopt the agenda?
I'll make that.
Robert, seconded by Mike. All those in favor? Motion is carried. Any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, we move on. Minutes, confirmation of the minutes of the April 18th, 2023 Heritage Committee. Are there any edits, errors, or omissions to make note of in those minutes? Seeing none, can I get a motion to adopt the minutes?
I wasn't at the meeting.
Right. Mike, seconded by Robert. All those in favor?
Sure.
Motion is carried. There are no delegations. Unfinished business list. Over to you, Jennifer.
All right. So not much different than last time. I did add for the plaque program, I did add 3 photos to the unfinished business list, just kind of at the end there, of the 3 plaques that were installed that I mentioned the last meeting. So it was 402 Academy Street, 433 Main Street, and then 15095 Front Road, which was the dry stone wall. And the picture also kind of shows some of the restoration work that was done. Doesn't show the full wall, just what's at the gate. So you can kind of get a glimpse of that, and it's really pretty. It's done really well. And then we are bringing the letter from MTO regarding listing the property, the Loyalist Gates. Again, we're going to be talking about that at the report that comes up. We brought a recommendation for everyone. We're still working on the reference manual with the subcommittee. The Parkway Gates, property review. Yeah, and that's the updates for that.
Any questions from committee members on Jennifer's report on the unfinished business?
Hopefully nobody needed.
No,
sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Jennifer. Have you got anything to that?
No, I was just saying hopefully nobody needed to print out that agenda because that's quite some big pictures on there. Sorry about that. A lot of ink.
Seeing no questions, can I get a motion to receive Jennifer's report? Ron moves, seconded by Robert. All those in favor? Motion is carried. Okay, on to the meat and potatoes. Item number 7, since there is no reporting from council. Item number 7, 7.1, Bill 23 and non-designated brackets listed properties. Are you introducing this, Jennifer?
Yeah, this is me. So as everyone will probably be aware, there's some changes to the Ontario Heritage Act again, part of Bill 23, which affects our non-designated property list. So what we are looking for, because within less than 2 years now, we need to start the designated designation of the properties on the list if we want to keep them, or else we can't touch them after 2 years for at least 5 years. So what we are looking for is essentially in the first recommendation, essentially a list of properties that are on that list that we're not interested in trying to designate, and then sending out a letter to the property owners of those properties just to see whether they are interested in the designating of their property. Before we start any sort of designation process, we ask the homeowners if they are interested. We don't go and designate the property out from under them. Essentially, we ask for permission first. So essentially, we want to know what properties we're sending the letter out to. It's easier to have a list of what properties we don't want to bother designating than trying to figure out which ones we do. I'm assuming there's going to be more of the ones that we do want to designate versus the ones we don't. So then we can go ahead and contact those property owners. So then we have kind of a working list to go off of when it's time to start that designation process.
So I know it's political, but if you look at the list, the vast majority is in Bath. And from creek to creek, Bath is a completely intact Upper Canada village. And it's not just a Upper Canada village, it's the Upper Canada village. It should be a district. And then that eliminates all of that, because those buildings then come under the control of council through planning as a heritage district. I know this was visited before I was on the committee, and there are going to be characters who are going to be venomously against this. But frankly, from the perspective of look around the province at places that have become districts, it has been nothing but good for those districts. And it would certainly be good for Bath to have the ability to control what happens in it. It's seems obvious. There are other properties here that are significant, and I think I sent the email out why Millhaven Inn is not designated. It should be. I understand maybe the owners don't want it to be. I don't know, but if I was to look at the list, that is probably the biggest one that I could see. But I'm actually saying the opposite of what you were saying. You were looking for the ones off the list.
Sorry, which property do you say definitely should be?
Millhaven Inn.
Millhaven Inn.
Oh, yes, okay.
It's got it in here. It says it's 1857. There's no way it's 1857. It's 1795, 1799.
Okay.
If you look at it, it's got original windows in it. It's clearly a very old building.
Yeah, that place has come up for discussion previously, I think.
Yeah, because of the proximity to the cathode plant, I think.
Yep.
But I don't know why it's not designated. It's obviously a very early Georgian building.
Okay.
But that all being said, flipping back to the bulk of these buildings, they're all in Bath. I think the reason they got listed was I think there was a desire amongst some to create a district, and there was resistance, and so they backed down. But honestly, now that listing has gone away, it seems like that's the best way to at least put some management on this, because there are so many early buildings in Bath, and frankly, none of them look very good. They're not in good shape, but
right.
But they're potentially an absolute jewel for Loyalists.
Yep. Andrea, please go ahead.
Just to follow up with a question on that, Ron, would you, because we do have a heritage district in Bath, would you be looking at just like an expansion of that to a certain point along Main Street, or what, like just trying to get a little bit of the parameters around?
I recommend extending it from creek to creek, because that's pretty much the footprint of the old village as it was 200 years ago. The problem with all of these things, though, is education, because you're going to get a reaction that's completely ridiculous. And I suspect council won't want to touch it, but they should. It's in their interest, and it does sort of deal with the fact there's a whole bunch of buildings here that are listed that then would at least have some control over them for what's going to happen. Because honestly, you could do things in Bath that would be terrible to Bath, and it would no longer be Bath. The irony is, like I've said with this whole thing that the province has done, heritage legislation also protects the government, because what it allows people to do is define what people consider valuable to them and protect them, instead of leaving all the controls off, having somebody come along and do something that's incredibly unpopular, and the government will take the blame for that, as they should. And so in a sense, it protects the government because it lays out what it is we want to protect. And Bath is really, really unique. I know an awful lot of people don't quite get that, but it's really, it's incredible to believe that it's still here, with most of its buildings still intact.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that's not addressing all the properties here, but it would address a lot of them.
So for outside, so we're going to send the letter off to everybody in Bath that's on that list, as well as the Millhaven Inn. Are there any others that like stand out that we don't want to send outside of Bath, that we don't want to send the letter out to? Because we could send the letter to everyone. It's just best to get that out of the way if there isn't something that right from the get-go we're not interested in adding.
I think you're going to have a tough time with the barns that we just listed. Just because they are barns. I agree they should be protected, but just have it's such a hill to climb given what we've got here. The other side of this is we don't really know how intact a lot of these buildings are.
Mhm.
Like they may actually be not intact at all, in which case they may just be the structure. Incidentally, with the Millhaven Inn, even if the structure is intact, that's a special building because it's a different kind of timber framing than was used in Ontario a decade or two later. So it's a kind of framing you get in colonial New England and in Europe, but you don't get it in anything built in the 19th century. So it's special even beyond that.
So in kind of similar to what you're saying there, that on Bath Road, so near the end of the list, it's at the top of the page on the last page of the list. There's the church, Beulah, I think, if I'm saying that correctly. So it no longer looks like the picture. It's was sold and it was being renovated as a dwelling now instead of a church. So I believe they've kept the stained glass windows at the front of the building, but I'm not sure what they've done with the inside. And I think they took out the windows on the sides of the building, so they're just squares. They're no longer the stained glass. They've also changed the siding.
Yeah.
Yeah, my that's exactly my point. I mean, they I'm sorry to say they trashed the building, and I don't. If you're if you're limited to a very limited pot, maybe you shouldn't burn a lot of energy on that. I'm thinking another one, and this is from my own perspective. It's a tragedy. It's the one in Amherstview, the stone one, because it was gutted. And the windows all replaced, chimney columns removed. Just the chimneys on the top are just token. So mantelpieces all went away. That's not long ago that happened. Because prior to that, that would have been a big candidate for designation, but I'd say now not so much. It's a tragedy because it's an important building. I think they only kept one mantelpiece. But it's hard to know, without seeing them. One that probably should stay in my mind, is the Regency Cottage in Odessa. There aren't a lot of those in Ontario, and there's two in Loyalist. Or I'm not sure if that one is near the town line. If you're on Highway 2, there's one. Is that on Loyalist side or the other side? When you're heading towards Napanee, do you know the one? I don't think it's got a listing if it is, but
no, it doesn't have a listing. I'm not sure if it's in Kingston or if it just squeaks.
Or it might be
Loyalist.
Napanee, but I'm not sure. It must be in Loyalist. Must be.
Or no, Napanee.
Yeah. But anyway, we're not talking about that. But there are very few of these, and they are uniquely Canadian. It's terrible when you have to sort of cut it down like that. I mean, and again, going back to Bath, just because of the nature of Bath, they should all be in the district, and maybe with them in the district, maybe it turns out they're nothing special, and somebody wants to do something with them, they can make the case, and that's might be what happens. I don't know, but at least then the township has the ability to manage it.
Mm-hmm. So in the, I've drafted the letter, just kind of a rough draft. One of the things I do mention that we're not doing the evaluation, like going through the criteria quite yet. We're just kind of testing the waters. So that is something that later on in like the research, if we get the go ahead from council as well as the property owners to designate a bunch or do the district, once we're actually in it and we get the green light, we can start looking more closely at the properties and the research to see if it'll meet the criteria. So that'll come down the line. Right now, we're just trying to see who's interested, and hopefully there's more than a couple.
Yeah. But again, I think, I don't know how would you do this politically to get township to seriously consider expanding the district, because honestly, it's a no-brainer. I mean, there are those that will complain, well, it'll increase my property values, and they might be right. But those that say that it's going to decrease the property values, there's no way. If you go look at Berryfield, Sydenham Ward, I mean, it's just, the list is huge, and you can see the impact of the designation of the district designation has very positive impacts on communities.
The problem is that there was a minor firestorm back when we just started doing a register of cultural buildings in Bath, and we ended up having a public meeting at St. John's there that was full of people who were unhappy at just being on a registry. So it would be,
I know, and it's it's actually, I think it's a relatively small group of people driving it, but there's a lot of people that pick it up. Yeah, very noisy, and many of the people following it are just following the people that are very loud. So you're not talking about a lot of people, yeah. And so I know it's a challenge. I'm not sure how to approach it, but it's the smart thing to do. There's no question.
Go ahead, Andrea.
I guess the one thing I was just going to add there is with our interest list, because when the majority of these properties were placed on it, council at the time had directed that, you know, they were only going to include the properties on the list that the property owners, you know, basically did not object to.
Okay.
So all of these properties so there were some that were being recommended to be added and aren't shown on here because there were objections from property owners. But the ones that we do have on there, they were all ones that people were either of support of or never came forward objecting to it. So, you know, fingers crossed, maybe there's some merit there that the ones that we do have on there aren't
I think if there's an approach, if there's in the letter you're going to write, you need to really emphasize the positive aspects of the designation. I mean, there's access to grants that can be there, for instance. I don't know. There's the bigger picture positiveness, but there are financial benefits too.
The grants are the carrot that will attract a lot of homeowners, potentially.
Yeah, I think so. Actually, and many of these buildings are really not in good shape. So, but then again, the chances are the owner doesn't care. So, yeah. And I don't know, personally, I don't know enough about a lot of these other buildings to say. I know why the ones are listed in Bath, because they're the ones that are potentially early buildings in Bath. That's why they're all listed, or played a role in the village. Whereas the ones outside, I don't know enough about them to make a comment, really. One I should comment, so really quite unique, is the one on County Road 7. Has the 24/24 windows, just up at 4. It had its original windows until about 6 or 7 years ago, which is stunning, because I don't know how many 24/24 windows there are around, but I don't know of any. So inside, is it intact or not? I don't know. You know the one I mean, right?
Is that the one for 82 County Road 7?
It sounds right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Were they were willing to get on the listing?
Yep, looks like. Because there was when there was a public meeting that I think it was in 2018, like just before the list was created. I still have some of the signed documents that were sent in and some of the letters from the homeowners that didn't want to be put on the list. We still have kind of the files of the properties that we wanted to add to the list, or that they wanted to add to the list. I wasn't around it yet, but yeah, they weren't. This is everyone who wasn't who was okay with being added. They weren't.
I think that's another building that should get a letter. and look at 1812 for sure. I forgot. I didn't realize it was that early actually, but yeah, it must be stunning inside.
Go ahead, Andrea.
Just in terms of the letter, if I may make a suggestion, given that, you know, with the exception of maybe the Beulah Church, which has been completely changed and doesn't have the same heritage value it did when it was initially listed, there could be potential in just sending a letter to all of these property owners, with the exception of that one, because, you know, because we haven't completed that detailed review to make sure that they meet all the criteria in the act for designation. We can get the interest back. People that are supportive of it, then, you know, that may be pushing harder with the couple of ones identified, like the Regency Cottage and the Millhaven Inn. But the other ones, seeing what the interest is, and if someone is really keen, it's going to be a much easier process to get it designated. And, you know, we could focus on those ones first, just to really start that criteria review.
Yeah, that's a good idea. But again, going back to
I'll come to you, Robert.
Yeah. Anyway, I think it's a good idea.
Go ahead, Robert.
So it seems to be a consensus. Do you want a motion authorizing this, Andrea, Jennifer?
I'll entertain that in a moment, Robert. I wanted to just return to Ron's initial introduction of the notion of extending the bounds of the Heritage District in Bath. And I realize it's putting Andrea on the spot a bit, but I don't know, Andrea, whether you can comment at all candidly to the committee as to, you know, the utility of doing that in the context of what we're addressing with Bill 23.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that definitely can be looked at. The process is obviously larger than a designation. It is quite a process, especially to update a heritage conservation district at that point. And from what I understand from the act, you can't even just do like an amendment to a heritage conservation district. Like, it would actually open up the entire plan. So when that's done, you can actually have an appeal, even on other ones that were already part of the district. So that's one thing to be aware of. I think it's something that can be looked at. We'd have to probably look at it further I know that the criteria has been enhanced for districts as well as individual designations as a result of this new bill. So we'd have to do that bigger review to ensure it meets the criteria and everything too. But as a starting point, we could gather the interest in terms of just designation, whether it ends up being through a heritage district or through an individual designation, see what we kind of get back from that. And, you know, we're seeing like some of these people are interested in there as well. And too, we can definitely explore it further, or and, you know, and the Heritage Committee we can do some of that work even without everybody in that area's support. To still, you don't need their permission to designate or to list them. It's just generally just always ends up being more controversial if you don't have their support. But that's not to say that still can't be reviewed, and the merit of that and a recommendation still brought to council.
So correct me if I'm wrong, the existing district is really quite limited. I think it includes the priest store, is that right? And the town hall.
Yeah.
There's 9 properties.
The Masonic Lodge, and
But most of them are kind of late Victorian, I think, except for the priest store and the town hall. So the risk of losing them on the heritage list isn't all that high, given what they are. Versus the ones we might be trying to encompass in a districting.
Mm-hmm.
So one other thing, I'm not sure when it's going to happen, but one of the things that Bill 23 is doing with the heritage conservation districts is at some point they're going to make it easier to amend a heritage conservation district. I don't know what the method of that is going to be. They haven't actually released that. I think they're still working on it. So I'm a little hesitant of what their process is going to be, if it's going to be helpful or not.
It might be the opposite.
Yeah, so that's something to keep in mind, kind of cross our fingers, but that is something to keep in mind as well, that if it is easier to amend a heritage conservation district without maybe the risk of losing what we have currently, that is something that can also be done, hopefully.
We're also not aware of any like recent concerns or complaints from any of the property owners within the district at this point, in being in the district. So
I guess another possibility, I mean, obviously the ideal thing would be to establish extend the district creek to creek, but okay, let's say there's a really noisy group isolated to one half block or something. Okay, exclude them and encourage the other spots. I mean, we're still way ahead if we do that.
yeah.
I note that I think Barb has finally joined us.
Can you hear me?
We can, Barb.
Now I can't see you, but I can hear you. You've disappeared on my screen, but at least we're in contact. Hello?
Oh, radio silence.
Yeah,
So we were.
can, yeah,
Oh,
go ahead,
Nathan.
Jennifer. I was just going to tell Barb where we were at, so you go ahead.
So we've just been looking.
Listening. I've been listening.
Oh,
I've
good,
been able to
good.
hear you, and for a while I could see you, but now I can't see you. I hear you.
Good.
Do you have any comments based on what you've heard so far?
In a way, I don't think I have any specific. We went from the Red Book for putting those Bath buildings on the register. So that's why they're there. That's one thing that I connected with. There are wonderful buildings all over Loyalist Township, but this idea of something being untouchable, I would say, for 5 years if you don't get it designated within the certain time frame, makes it all very strange.
Barb, did you hear about sending a letter to everyone asking if they wanted to be designated?
Yeah, I heard that, and I guess my feeling is that, yes, if we got some people who were really willing to do it at this point, where they weren't, 3 years ago when we did the register, that would be positive. Otherwise, I guess everything is equally in limbo as far as Heritage Act is concerned, as far as I read it.
Yeah.
We do have 2 years, and someone mentioned making the letter be sure to be very positive. I agree with that 100%, because in this new configuration, with things being just bumped off the register, they don't even have the 90 days protection from demolition. They'll have nothing, really.
And I might point out from the political perspective, from for Nathan, imagine one of these really important buildings did end up getting bulldozed literally overnight, and if
Which
it
one
got
was that?
No, I'm just suggesting one of these buildings, imagine the owner applied for a demolition permit, got it and bulldozed it on a Friday. The blowback to council could be significant over time if it hit the right chords. So it's not something it's not somewhere we should go.
No.
Right. I will mention that the building you were talking about at the west edge of the township, the Huffman House, that is a very important building that, you know, it's illogical that someone can decide it has no heritage value just because they bought it. And we should keep our eye on all of these important buildings.
Yeah, that is an important building too. I was trying to think of that other Regency Cottage out on Highway 2. Is that?
Oh,
in
and the
Loyalist?
Regency Cottage, definitely. The one in Odessa.
That
And
one
there's
for sure.
There's another one west of there. Well, not exactly, but similar. All the buildings in Odessa that are related to the Booth family should not be lost track of.
Mhm.
Now, the one closest to the mill, that is stayed on the register, but those folks at the time were not interested in having the house be designated. And this is the worrying situation, that people's attitudes towards designation, you know, will, in this new configuration of bill, really put their buildings in peril in the long run. They'll have no protection.
There's another problem happening that's been getting worse and worse is insurance. And the insurance issue is a mystery to me because in my mind, if you insure a house for replacement value, it's replacement value and it doesn't matter if it's designated. Insurance companies are deciding now to boost premiums dramatically if they're designated or decline to insure them at all if they're designated.
Really?
Yeah, that's happening a lot and it's happening more and more, which is really strange because, you know, you can designate a house because Don Cherry lived in it. And what does that have to do with your insurance? So there's that avenue. That's going to have a very big chilling effect on designation across the board. And I don't really understand where it's coming from. I suspect that insurance companies have decided to provide, when there's a claim, two avenues. One is hard cash up front for less than replacement value. And the other option is to fix it at replacement value, thinking a lot of people will take the cash. It'll save them a lot of money, but when a municipality has a heritage easement, they can't do that option. And that may be why they are doing this. I don't know.
It's also happening with mortgage brokers. Some people can't get mortgages on their houses if it's a certain age or has a heritage, anything on it.
Right, which is ludicrous. It's obscene, really. So in the insurance thing, some of it makes sense. If you got knob and tube wiring or cast iron plumbing, these are things that cause claims, and I get it. But the other stuff I don't get.
Robert?
So yeah, so just coming back to what you said about insurance and mortgages relates to what the thing is, that we don't have the authority. The committee hasn't really got any ability to do anything other than recommend to council. Yeah. And council has historically, now I don't know, I can't speak for council, obviously. Historically, council sees it, what Barb has said, if you own the building, it's your property. Historically, they believe that gives you the right to do it, bulldoze it, whatever. Yeah. And for all our, and I agree, education is key to solving that or helping correct that. But it's a long-term process, and 2 years is very short term to do things. I think we could burn a lot of our resources and time trying to designate a larger area in Bath and not get anywhere except irritate's not the right word, council against any of our proposals. Mm-hmm. I think I'm not I'm thinking that you're right about the value of the properties there, but I don't think there's something we can achieve. I think perhaps going down the list, sending the letter. To the other
That's the first
properties.
step. Yeah, no question. That's the first step.
Yeah.
And it'd
What's
be
worth-
interesting to see.
First step.
Yeah.
Let's do what we
Yeah,
can do.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And then, oh, sorry, go ahead, Nathan.
No, go ahead, Jennifer. I was just going to concur, sort of, as I say, gathering the consensus around the square table with little squares. That I think that is a good first step. And I think there's been, if I'm not mistaken, consensus around sending letters pretty well to the bulk of that list, save the ones mentioned.
I guess we only mentioned one, didn't we? Or
I think we did. The church.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mentioned the one in Amherstview, but
Yeah.
it would be nice if it were designated. I just don't know that we're getting. It's already being pretty toasted.
Jennifer, please proceed.
I was just going to say that with after the letter, one of the things that we were going to put in the letter for further information, if they didn't want to just contact me, that I believe we were doing a public meeting or like a session that the homeowners could actually come and participate in and kind of ask their questions and voice their concerns and whatnot as well. So there would also be that avenue as well that we could speak with the property owners in person, hopefully.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Further comments on the report before I take a motion?
Oh, and the other thing, just for that report before we're done, is whether we want to list the Loyalist gates. We already know MTO is not designating them. This was kind of like the backup plan to the designation because they weren't interested in designating. They've already sent that letter, or they didn't send the letter. They just phoned me and said no. After about 1.5 years of badgering them. So do we want to list the Parkway gates for the 2 years and then just kind of let it go, or?
I would say no. There's enough other work to do.
Okay.
It's not going
This
anywhere.
is why I think we should invent our own, what we call it. We can't call it register, but our own list of the collected features in Loyalist Township that make Loyalist Township distinctive. And in that way, we would have things like the Eastern Gateway, and we could include buildings that didn't want to be listed on the register, such as the Huffman House, and other things that are significant in our township. It would free us from this imposition from Bill 23, because in effect, there's no sense for there even being a register.
Well, I think the designated buildings are still protected.
That's correct. But there's other things in the township which are on this register. Those are things that are not designated, but are still given some
Significant.
value.
Yeah.
I'd support that as a separate motion. And
It
then
would be a separate activity.
if there was perhaps in the future a change of attitude at Queen's Park, then we'd have a list ready to go.
I think that's, yeah, I think we should be vigilant on that and protect, you almost, maybe it's considered an invasion of privacy, but should someone new buy it, you might send a note. We think this is a significant building and don't know.
It's not a bad
we do
idea.
have to keep an eye out on all of these.
So you ready for a motion, Mr. Chairman?
I will take a motion, Robert.
I'll move one then.
Okay.
Then the letter as sort of worked out through consensus.
Yeah, consensus is best for sure.
So moved.
Okay,
Can I
I'll
get
second it.
Ron will second that. Any comments on the motion? Okay, I'll call the question then. All those in favor? Barb, I'm guessing is an aye.
Aye, yes,
There we
aye.
go. Okay, motion is carried. And so we move on to, is no correspondence. Any announcements or inquiries from members? There's none from staff.
I guess committee should be aware that there's going to be an open doors event in the township, June 17. Some heritage sites will be included in that.
What day is that?
Saturday, June 17.
Okay. So I won't be here.
Duly noted. And our next move is to adjourn. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
I'll make
Mike?
a motion to adjourn.
All right, I'll take that,
It
Barb.
took me long enough to get there.
Mike seconds. All right, all those in favor?
All right.
Motion is carried. We are adjourned. Thank
All
you,
right.
everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I'll
thank
see
you.
you
Thank
soon.
you for everybody's comments. You know, and just as a way of signing off, you know, this is really important work for us at this time, given the legislative environment around these issues. You know, not to politicize it too much. And I definitely appreciate everybody's time and everybody's comments this evening. So thank you very much.
Good. Thanks, Nathan.
All right, thanks.
All right.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Have a good night.